Welcome to a new episode of the Sox Machine Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Nelson. We are recording this on Wednesday night, July 1st, 2026, after the Chicago White Sox ended up losing on Wednesday to the Baltimore Orioles, but they won the first two games, and that is huge because they finally snapped their road series losing streak, finally winning a road series since early May back in San Diego. And this is a good omen because now the White Sox head to Cleveland, which is to date the biggest series of the season for the Chicago White Sox, as they still hold a one-game lead over the Cleveland Guardians in the American League Central. Joining me is Sox Machine's beat reporter James Fegan and managing editor Jim Margalus. And hello, gentlemen. Let's start with recapping what happened in Baltimore. As the White Sox had two easy wins on Monday and Tuesday, thanks to the offense. And again, the White Sox are 45-40 on the season. And James, you recently wrote a wonderful feature with plenty of profanity from White Sox hitting coach Derek Showman. And I'm sure he is going to enjoy as far as those quotes, as he got excited last time about it. And I found it very interesting because it continues this line of coaching and thinking from Will Venable of leading with empathy and, on a hitting perspective, not trying to put too much pressure on the hitters, allowing them to make mistakes, understand that they want their ace swings, and to continue to try to do as much damage as possible. Did we get a chance to see some of that come to light against Baltimore, especially in the first two games of this series?
I mean, I think it's like something that's like their overall methodology, which is very warm or conducive, at least they say so, to like coming back in terms of like the players believing, they not getting discouraged, not kind of getting wrapped up in their mistakes, even kind of accepting that in getting multiple shots at a starter, maybe not even having success or just trying to get to the bullpen in general, that there's always kind of opportunities in the game. I think Showman's even referenced like telling him about like when they're down in big games that they still get paid off the at-bats that they have late innings, which is like, I think a refreshing tone for them to take. So, well, I can't say like, oh, they had like a pep talk in the seventh inning after like Baz departed on Monday and like that's why they rallied. I think that their general attitude of like moving on from mistakes quickly and not necessarily like having a restrictive response to or even just like a reactive response to like not getting to a starter or not getting like offense going early in the game, and being kind of not doing things that kind of facilitate panic or self-doubt or just kind of like frustration early in the games. I think they view that as something that pays dividends broadly and certainly like keeps them in a good frame of mind when they're down in games. So that's at least what they attribute, having have so many comeback wins and having so many, especially recently, like because they try to slug. I feel like they've had some outings recently where the starter like has a pretty efficient, you know, start or pretty efficient open to the game where they're getting through the lineup once or twice on a limited amount of pitches, just because like the Sox are so often trying to like blitz strikes that they see early in that bat and not wait for them. And the fact that that doesn't seemingly like build panic in them or see them kind of spiral into losing their approach or not, like even just kind of hunkering down a bit more and working the count later in games as they adjust mid game, is something that I guess they at this point view as endemic to what they're doing overall and like kind of the environment they're building for hitters. So yeah, that's part of the positive feeling that they have. Also, generally, just they got a lot of pop. They got a lot of left-handed pop, and that should play well in that ballpark, and it certainly did first couple of games in
I
terms of being
think
able to run
one,
the baseball.
yeah, I think a good example too from the White Sox as far as the culture that they are building, Jim, when it comes to the offensive side, is allowing young players like Jacob Gonzalez to take his lumps. He had a pretty lengthy hitless streak, but in the last 10 games, Jacob Gonzalez has figured out how to hit MLB pitching. And that is huge, especially in the bottom of the lineup where he's batting ninth and he's coming in with these big doubles, especially against Baltimore, that seem to be backbreaking, where Orioles pitching thinks that they have a breather here because they're facing number 9 hitter and they still get hurt. And in this series against Baltimore, Gonzalez went 5 for 11 with 6 RBIs. But when it comes to Jacob Gonzalez, Jim, Munetaka Murakami could be returning soon. We don't have a definitive date when Munetaka Murakami returns. But when he does, and with how Jacob Gonzalez has been hitting, how do you see Jacob Gonzalez fitting in with the current White Sox roster?
There's always the caveat that every time we try to plot out what a roster will look like when a player returns from injury, somebody else gets hurt. And so you never have this confluence of healthy guys that are going to spell the end of Luis Angel Acuna, like Austin Hayes, Everson Pereira, like we've been playing that game with the outfield. So like I'm hesitant to do that with any part of the White Sox roster, be it rotation or infield or anything else, because of the way an injury ends up solving the problem well enough. But let's indulge your question and say Murakami comes back with nobody else missing time. And I think this, there are a couple of ways to do it. This could finally be the end of Luis Angel Acuna because he isn't really playing the outfield much anymore now that Tristan Peters is more or less the everyday center fielder. And if he's the backup shortstop, well, Maidroth and Gonzalez can cover that well enough. And it seems like Acuna just right now, he's kind of a bunter, especially with the runners on base. Like he more or less gives himself up, or whether it's he's terrified of grounding to a double play, or the coaching staff is, or they just want to get something out of his bat. They're almost treating him like a pitcher when he comes to the plate with a runner on base. So you could use this as the opportunity to be like, well, it's Acuna can go out. We will have an 8-9 part of the lineup, no matter who's pitching, that feels like it can start something for the top of the order, because either Gonzalez will be down there or Maidroth will be down there. So there's that approach. But that requires probably a big chunk taken out of Maidroth's playing time, which some people might be okay with because of his platoon splits. But I think the White Sox have been generally supportive of him, or like they like the defense he brings, the overall approach he brings, and aren't dismissing him as a platoon player yet. So if that's the case, then it seems like probably Gonzalez goes down just because, Acuna, say what you will about him, but the White Sox really don't care how often they play him. Like if he plays one day a week, it's more or less fine because he's out of options. And if they lose him, or they try to put him through waivers, they might lose him. And that's not something they seem like they want to do until it gets to that point where their hand is forced. And if they want Gonzalez to play every day, then he can go back to Charlotte and maybe go back to positions of need that they can anticipate, be it second base or be more of a utility guy versus being somebody who's forced into first base and just wait for the next opportunity to pop up. I guess the other one would be, Andrew Benintendi is, DH right now is left-handed bat. So if you wanted Gonzalez to be more of a DH or use that really more of a flex spot versus Benintendi hogging those at bats, that would be another way to do it. Then you relegate Benintendi to the bench. But, everybody seems like they're more or less happy with him being the veteran presence on the bench, especially since he's playing well with Grichuk. Being somebody that can swap in and out. So it seems like they have a good arrangement there. So I would say I would anticipate the most likely scenario being Gonzalez goes back down to Charlotte, but I wouldn't necessarily bet on it over Acuna finally getting waived or DFA'd, see if he clears waivers, just because they could step on the gas and say, we want to have a threatening lineup no matter what. And we'll see how Gonzalez plays when he's playing half the time versus most of the time.
Well, there's Junior Perez, who he had a 3-run homer against the Orioles. Is that an opportunity to option back to Charlotte without having to lose Luis Angel Acuna?
They could, but just more a matter of like if they want, Gonzalez hasn't played the outfield yet. So if they're looking to get him at bats, that's where I think you kind of run into problems is Gonzalez be on the roster, but also get at bats, and whose at bats does he take? And I don't think he threatens Perez's at bats to where, he's in the factoring the discussion.
Well, they have maybe Jim finally found more bats than spots in the White Sox lineup.
They haven't done it yet. They have to actually get there. Like Murakami is like 1 to 2 or more weeks away. Like until they actually reach that point, they're not more bats and spots. That's the problem with like doing this. Who happens when somebody goes like comes back? Projection is that you were never actually overloaded until you reach the point, which is the whole reason you need coverage. Sorry.
Yes, I know. That's what Jim mentioned earlier when he started.
Just said it in a more
with the
flustered
question.
fashion.
Hey, Howard.
There are over 8 million drivers in the state of Illinois. With that many people on the road, accidents are bound to occur. I'm attorney Howard Ankin, and if you or someone you care about has been involved in an auto, rideshare, or trucking accident, I'm here to help.
He has your number in his phone!
Call my office for a free consultation at 312-6-million. I'm here when you need me. Injury law made personal, that's Ankin Law.
Let's talk about the players that we were hoping or we thought needed a big series against Baltimore. We know about the White Sox starting pitching, and Noah Schultz returned, and he took the start on Wednesday, and things were going pretty smoothly until the 5th inning. And James, that was your pick. White Sox could use some help in the starting rotation. They could really use someone to be that number 5 starter in this rotation right now. What did you like from Noah Schultz's start on Wednesday?
His slider played for whiffs to each-handed hitters, I guess as well as he could have hoped. It obviously didn't carry him through the 5th inning or anything like that. But in terms of like showing progress or showing the sweeper playing to top-handed hitters, I want to say one, like the CSW was pretty good, but just in general, like I think it was 14 swinging strikes. Like that was pretty happy zone for him to be in overall. It's just like, especially more so if he's like throwing strikes, which he's still not doing to a sufficient degree. And it's kind of out of character outside of like when he's dealing with knee stuff. And you've obviously had him miss a bunch of time with recurring knee stuff last year and kind of have it this year. So it wasn't exactly like, this looks like him top operational gear, even outside of like, not saying like he's not healthy, but just in terms of like the Noah Schultz, it's like going to be, be a dynamic part of the rotation going forward in the second half as you're worried about like upgrading the rotation. Would like to see like more or less uncompetitive misses in general. And so a little of what he needed and a little of like stepping back from like what is the baseline profile of what makes it work, which is, pounding the zone. So, but on the one side, I thought like they need a good start from him because maybe like the bullpen would be needed in the first 2 games. Instead, it wasn't needed at all, really, beyond like some Grant Taylor work. So they didn't need him to get to 6 innings to like have a coherent plan to end the game, and then just not doing anything offensively took care of that. So at least the pen's in a good place going to Cleveland. So that part of like needing Noah Schultz didn't come up as much. But I don't know, some good, some bad.
And that was going to be my follow-up is what you're hoping to see that he can improve upon, because he's going to get an extra day of rest as the White Sox have Monday off after their Sunday game against Cleveland, and they'll be returning to action at home at Wright Field against the Boston Red Sox on Tuesday, July 7th. And Noah Schultz right now is projected starter. Is there a milestone or what aspect of Noah Schultz's start against the Red Sox are you hoping for more improvement, James?
Under 3 walks, I think, was like probably a crude way to say it, but certainly like being able to locate the sinker, just fastballs a bit more and working counts more. Like I think those are general things that would work towards, fewer walks, which is more just like tagging it to result. But I felt like it was kind of, there was maybe like one of those walks where it's just like, all right, you lost a good battle and you don't really fault him for it. But I think the rest were just kind of like spraying the fastball a bit, which he was kind of like up and down with control through the rehab process. So him being rusty a little bit, like that happens, but more so than like, it's nice to see the whiffs uptick, but like if Schultz is like a 7 or 8 K per 9 guy with like control and like a 50% ground ball rate, we'd be like, all right, that looks like the guy who's coming up as a prospect. Whereas like there's not really the big precedent of like him being super effective while like working Dylan C style, where he's walking 3 to 4 guys per outing.
Got it. All right. Well, we'll see what Schultz does. Again, his next projected start is against the Boston Red Sox next week. Jim, your pick was Colson Montgomery, and he hit his 21st home run of the season. He did go 2 for 10 against the Orioles with 4 strikeouts, but he also did drive in 3 RBIs. Is that a satisfying outcome for you from Colson Montgomery in this series?
It's in terms of how it played. Yeah. I mean, just because the homer was really impressive. In those Utah Street violent 440 footers, always fun to watch. And, one hit a game is kind of the baseline for you to contributed something. So that part worked. I think, kind of bigger picture is it fits in well with his June, in which he kind of hit 200 and he slugged pretty well, but he also struck out nearly 40% of the time. So 4 strikeouts and 10 plate appearances is a lot. And you just wonder how long that can continue. Like, he's been contributing while doing that. So it's not a case where you're sounding any alarms necessarily, but it's kind of like the long time to go on striking out 40% of the time and think like, is it going to get better, or is it going to have to pay the price of having so many empty plate appearances to where you're going to see a kind of pronounced slump that, requires some intervention besides the odd game off. So it's okay. Just at some point, you'd like to see him, break the strikeout jag he's been on and produce more, raise the average a little bit. But if he's able to somehow go 1 for 5 every game and hit the occasional homer, like that's, it's hard to bank on a 200 average playing that well or that practically, but he's found a way to do it so far in his career.
Is this an Adam Dunn hitting profile, but it actually can play shortstop?
Fewer walks. So it's a case where
the chase list.
Yeah, it's there's more of a hit tool, but it's also like the hit tool is tested more because he goes out of the zone more, and I think he's trying to. You can see him thinking long with pitchers and pitchers getting to him because like, oh, they're going to attack me high, and then they go higher than high, and somehow he ends up chasing out. So yeah, he's a work in progress still. Like he said in James' post, the Showman post, like when I'm struggling, I'm adjusting, and just been, I guess you could just say there's been a lot of adjustments lately. But fortunately, playing shortstop and not having like the numbers are down, but he hasn't had like the huge hitless slump. He had one in the middle of the month, but lately it's just been like 1 hit a game mostly. And that's fine. It's not great for the season numbers, but as it plays for a shortstop, kind of like Tristan Peters in center field, like if he's playing good center field and he comes up with a single, that's something that'll keep his value afloat until he, it gets on a heater.
Well, again, it is 21 home runs for Colson Montgomery. He's on pace to maybe get to 40 home runs this year. Only one White Sox shortstop in franchise history has hit 25 or more home runs. Pop quiz. Do you remember who that shortstop is, Jim?
Is that the Ron Hansen?
No.
Okay.
More recent.
Jose Valentine?
James? It is Jose Valentine.
Yeah, I was like,
it's Jose Valentine, Josh.
Thank you, James. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jose did it 3 times. Nobody else for White Sox shortstops has hit 25 home runs.
Hansen topped out at 20, but it was in 1964 at Old Comiskey Park, so it played really big.
Yeah.
Ended up being his 7.7 WAR season.
Juan Uribe came close. Alexa Ramirez came close. Tim Anderson came close. But Colson Montgomery just needs to hit 4 more, and he joins very rare company in White Sox franchise history. And then my pick was Tristan Peters. Tristan had a solid series, went 4 for 12 against Baltimore. Solid performance. I thought that he was going to be the one to maybe help carry the offense and set the table for top of the lineup with his performance at the bottom of the lineup. But that ended up being Jacob Gonzalez. Again, Jacob Gonzalez picking up 6 RBIs in that series win against the Baltimore Orioles. So good series win for the White Sox. Also a cap tip. I thought that Sean Burke looked really strong as well, Jim, on Monday. And he seems to be on a heater right now.
Yeah, he's helped stabilize the rotation. I think he's been if not a number two starter, the way you classically think of one, at least the number two starter this rotation needs behind Davis Martin. I think Anthony Kay has been, yeah, he's pitched more like a number four than number three, but he's kind of a number three right now because Eric Fetty needs, yeah, whether it's opener support or whether he's like a bet to go 5 innings, like he's more of a number five as a number four. So everybody's kind of like one slot down in this rotation. But like we talked about with the midseason grades, it's worked so far. It hasn't been the problem. And every turn where it doesn't get exposed or you don't feel that cumulative effect of like one guy disappointing, another guy disappointing because they're all pitching slightly above their pay grades, that's basically a win.
Well, for the White Sox, they made their way from Baltimore to Cleveland on Wednesday to get ready for a very important 4-game series against the Cleveland Guardians. The Guardians won their last game against the Texas Rangers. They're currently 45-42, so they are just a game back of the Chicago White Sox, even though the White Sox have 2 games in hand. In their last 10 games, the Guardians are 4-6 at home this year. Even though they're one of the few teams in the American League that has a winning record on the road, their home record is just 22-20. So they're not seeing the same level of success like the White Sox have, or even like the Tampa Bay Rays. For the season series, the Chicago White Sox currently lead that against the Guardians, as the White Sox won that last series at Wright Field, winning 2 out of 3. Your probable pitchers for this series: Thursday night, it is Davis Martin against Slade Cecconi. Friday night, it's Anthony Kay against Gavin Williams. Saturday, it's Sean Burke against Parker Messick. And then on Sunday, we'll see if there's an opener. But right now, it is Eric Fetty against Tanner Bybee. And James, with these games being in Cleveland, run prevention is a big factor in how these games go between the Guardians and the White Sox. So many defensive blunders in Cleveland over the years have cost the White Sox games. And right now, opposing teams are only scoring 3.92 runs per game against the Guardians in Cleveland. But I think one of the bigger factors and the way that Will Venable has to manage this series is how does he use his best bullpen weapons in Grant Taylor and Sean Newcomb? Do you have any insight or any thoughts on how he could use those two in these 4 games?
Well, if I've learned anything from writing about his strategy, I think he will use them aggressively, Josh. You kind of
use them often.
I'd be surprised. I don't think with like necessarily special consideration. Like you're talking about like these a lot of lefties that they'll probably stretch out over the course of the order. Pizzana, DeLauder, Watson's been a menace. Manzardo. Cooper Ingle they called up. Even Kwan has struggled, but it seems like he's still regular Stephen Kwan against the White Sox. Taylor and Newcomb are both being multi-inning presence. Usually are your answer to them trying to stagger out their lefties. Like, all right, I'm just going to like wipe out a whole slate of time through the order of them coming up in leverage. And so because both they offer that function to them rather than like trying to be super targeted with get as many as you can with like one Brian Hudson outing. I think on top of like that, generally like their approach is like if they have a lead, they have a win in sight, they're going to like go aggressively at it rather than like conserve resources for like say they're up 5-2 and trying to protect like that lead over the last like 2 innings and there's like nothing but lefties. I think he'd sooner just like, hey, let me just put Grant Taylor, who's great against lefties, at this and salt this game away rather than like, oh, I'm worried about like Saturday and I don't want to use Grant too much. We're going to make Sir Anthony Dominguez like go into the teeth of this. I don't think they're going to play that conservation game. So I don't think that I'd be surprised. Maybe there's a little like half of your consideration for it if like the situation allows, or if like certainly if the game like opens up in another inning, like if you're going to go for 2 for Newcomb or Taylor and like the Sox score 3 and like in between like what would be his 2 innings, maybe you back off there for future thing. But I don't think that they would necessarily sacrifice or take like undue risk for the idea of like, oh, we want Taylor or Newcomb back on Sunday sort of situation. I think what would be consistent with them would be, all right, here's our opportunity. Let's go for it at full force and take this win. And because, I mean, if I don't think it really entered their strategy, but maybe like a back of your mind thing is like, they only need a split from this to leave town with the lead in the division. So maybe don't overcomplicate it.
That's a good point. These were tight games at Rate Field. I'm imagining that these are still going to be tight games in Cleveland. So that's why I'm more wondering about how often Taylor is used in this upcoming series. Can they use him in 2 of the 4 games, Jim? Because if they can, then I think that gives them an opportunity when they do use him that they can, as James pointed out, walk out with a split. But it'd be not in the White Sox favor, of course, if they use Grant Taylor and they end up losing that game. So this is where I am curious to see on how the White Sox handle as far as these late inning situations coming out of the bullpen. And maybe we'll see just exactly how much confidence they have left in Sir Anthony Dominguez.
I'm guessing Taylor would be, 2 innings if they have a lead, 1 inning if they're behind or he needs to get some work because he hasn't thrown in 5 days, and then keep him available for either back-to-back or 2 out of 3 games with the lead, trying to really prioritize that. I think with Dominguez, I'm curious if they still go to him in the 6th inning or 7th inning, versus the bottom of the order. If they try to work him in earlier in a game versus having it being the last line of defense or having to be backed up by like a Chris Murphy or something like that in the, in a closer type situation, if they've already used Taylor and they want a righty in there. So yeah, I think it's probably a bigger series for figuring out the Dominguez thing on the fly versus Taylor. I think the Taylor usage is pretty solid, and he's been really good as of late, to where it should be pretty, if not paint by numbers, because they've used him unconventionally, but at least what he's going to enter based on leads and part of the lineup. But I think Dominguez is more the mystery.
Well, for the Guardians, Chase DeLauter has returned for them, and he's currently on a 10-game hitting streak. We did not see him in the series against the White Sox. And we used to be worried about Jose Ramirez and Steven Kwan, but it feels like with the rookies that the Guardians have, Jim, like we spent a lot of time talking about the White Sox rookies and how they have been excelling. But DeLauter, Khalil Watson, Travis Bazzana, these 3 really feel like the big threats against White Sox pitching this weekend.
It was kind of that story last year. It's sneaky how it happened, but I was looking at the Guardians splits against the White Sox last year. Jose Ramirez had a 394 OPS against the White Sox last year.
Wow.
Steven Kwan had a 507 OPS against the White Sox. They still drew their share of walks. So I think game to game, the at-bats were tough. And also Ramirez stole 6 bases and 6 attempts. So like he made himself a nuisance, even though he wasn't hitting. Like he maximized the times he was on base. To where it didn't feel like the White Sox really got one over on him. But when you look at who did the damage, it was among the 4-digit OPSs, it was David Fry, Kyle Manzardo, but then in the number 2 spot, Jhonkensy Noel, who's I think in AAA right now. He's out of the Guardians organization, and then CJ Kayfus, number 1, who is he played himself out of the mix and is on the 40-man roster, but in AAA. He went off for the time that he was. So like Khalil Watson coming up and immediately proving himself a pain, even though he can't draw a walk in the majors. Like that fits right in with the Kayfus thing of like, Kayfus didn't play that well last year, but he played well against the Sox. And there's always somebody, whether it's whack-a-mole, whether it's, exhausting all the resources to face the big guns, and then they just, ease up, or just, just the way it shakes out is a lesser hitter getting more favorable pitches to hit in high leverage situations when they think they're out of the woods. So it's I think the games didn't have stakes last year. So I think that's probably, the reason why it wasn't so granular in terms of whether Ramirez or Kwan are trying to figure out who made a series or who broke a series open for the Guardians. But I think now that we're paying closer attention, it's worth looking at that and saying, well, Kwan's still a pain, but also, it's when it comes to the Guardians, they managed to, maybe it's a case of they just game plan against the White Sox really well, or it just happens to be luck. And because it's a division opponent and you see these guys so many times, it's inevitable that somebody without a track record is going to make themselves a pain. Like even like Austin Hedges is playing really well this past month. He's managed to step up and be somebody who is maybe not the sample's too small to call him a bet, but he's no longer like an automatic out in the ninth spot. They're finding ways to get their 3 or 4 runs a game, even without Ramirez.
Yeah, Patrick Bailey hasn't been much of a factor for the Guardians, mostly because pitchers love throwing to Austin Hedges. And to your point, Jim, Hedges has, instead of try to hit a home run every time at the plate, he's just trying to get on base. So he's getting a lot more production offensively than normal. Not a very good offensive catcher still, but he's still producing defensively for the Guardians.
He's got a 102 WRC plus on the year after homering today. Not to undercut your point entirely, but
is that a career high for Austin Hedges?
I would imagine. Yeah, by a good amount.
Yeah.
I think you could add this WRC plus of the previous 3 years together, which is not mathematical, and it would still be below 102.
So you are correct. It would be 27 plus 21 plus 48. So 48 plus 48, 96.
Wow. Well, good for you, Austin Hedges. Let's not have a big weekend against the White Sox. Who needs a big series for the White Sox? So, James, I will start with you. In order for the White Sox to at least get a series split or maybe win this series against the Guardians, who needs a big series?
So this is from the White Sox perspective, who needs to shine rather than who needs this big series like in a, Gil from The Simpsons type of desperation in the job, the workplace perspective.
Is there someone right now in the White Sox that's in a Gil situation?
That's certainly just the way I interpreted the question last week. So now I'm questioning my process. I think with all the lefties we've talked about in the batting order, tall ass since he just faced them pretty recently. But I think Anthony Kay having, especially with you talking about how are they going to meet out the Grant Taylor to get through this? Kay getting them through 6 or 7 even or certainly just matching the effectiveness that he had his last time out, given that they'll probably be figuring out how to open for Fetty or maybe even Burke as well. Just being their only left-handed starter in that mix, I think that continuing to play as an advantage would probably be big for them, especially coming off a rough one in Kansas City. That said, don't really see the same. They have some lefties in the bullpen. They have a couple. Heron and Zabrowski are certainly good, but certainly with Cade Smith or just kind of a lot of the meat for Holderman. What's his face? Sean Armstrong, who closed it out their one win in Chicago. Those are guys who I think you need a Benintendi that looks hot against them. Certainly lengthens it out a bit more, whereas you would expect Grichuk to be more of the situational weapon who randomly ties a game off of Cade Smith, maybe, but more there are more limited opportunities to really use him, both with the right-handed starters primarily from Cleveland and not as many, at least, left-handed relievers as the White Sox offer. So Benintendi is probably someone there's a bit more perspective on as where is some surprise offense going to come from? Yeah.
I like those picks.
Left-handed people.
Left-handed people. I like those picks. How about you, Jim? Who needs a big series for the White Sox?
Maybe not in terms of needs. It's going to be awful if he doesn't get it. But Kyle Teel, just hoping to see steady progress from him, just because I think Drew Romo, it's been really rough watching him when he has to play. And so I think just Teel progressing, building on a decent start, I think, to his season, more strikeouts than you're used to seeing. Maybe not running as, I can't tell if it's him being a little bit slower or just
being cautious.
Well, him being cautious, or whether it's just the kind of Eloy Jimenez effect of just watching somebody run all out and just bracing for something to break apart on him, to where it's more painful watching him run than he's actually sensing. But yeah, I think he's still playing through some rust or some restrictions. So I think just building on what he's done so far to continue working towards being number one catcher that the White Sox need him to be, with no interruptions, would go a long way. Because I think Romo is really, and Caro's been off to a slowish start with Charlotte. So kind of has to be the guy
Really?
because I think the two catchers they have on the depth chart beside him are not cutting it right now. So this Teel return has to stick.
That's disappointing for Caro. I hope he figures it out. It's starting to become almost like a lost season for him, right, Jim?
Kind of.
I know there's still half a season left to go.
Yeah, it's a case where, Romo is there because, kind of like the Acuna thing. He doesn't have to play. And, Caro just needs at bats. He needs the most plate appearances possible to get on track. So makes sense for him. If he lights up AAA, it won't necessarily guarantee success, but at least it'll show that he's in a better place. And, right now he's not doing that. So yeah, lots of time for him to get right in Charlotte, hopefully. So that's why I think Teel just maintaining this track of decent start, showing flashes, just has to, I think, steady out the swing and miss a little bit, but otherwise been a pretty good start for him altogether.
For me, I'm going with Sam Antonacci. He was a big factor the last time the White Sox and Guardians played. He's still new to left field. And James, we know that big wall in Cleveland sometimes plays a factor for new left fielders playing there for the first time. Maybe not as severe as Fenway, but I feel like Sam Antonacci has come a long way playing outfield defense, James. Like, he's new to this position, and you got a chance to watch him in person play the position more than I have. Is this a position that you think he can stick at rather than it still kind of feels like break glass in case of emergency for the White Sox this year, having Sam Antonacci play left field, but I feel like the more he plays there, the more I'm confident in his ability to stay there long term.
It's going, I guess, about as well as I would have expected. I think physically he has the tools of like a left fielder, and he like kind of plays max effort all the time. So in terms of like guys you can rotate out there on a whim, I think he's going to do about as good a job as anyone who kind of takes it like mid-season as much as he did. Like, that said, like, his metrics aren't like amazing or anything like that. And
Sure.
He's definitely like figuring out his routes as he goes in a way. And I think he's just like any new outfielder would. You kind of worry like how he's going to deal with like unconventional caroms, which could happen to him in Cleveland, or just giving the fact that he gives you max effort all the time, which is great. And to his benefit long term, obviously, is that, he's going to try to dive in situations where maybe like he can be more conservative and that's the right play, or overthrow the cutoff man and stuff like that. So I think it's going to be like a process. And certainly if he's a 400 OBP guy, then I guess he can play whatever he wants, so you don't really have to worry about it. But like, it's still not like a traditional left field profile, so I don't know if like that's what they want to do with that position long term necessarily, and or if if you develop more strength or acquire more players out there in the corner outfield long term, I don't know how necessarily. Does he like start to demand like second base at bats from like Chase Mydroff at some point down the road? I know I actively pushed against like people trying to put him together, but in terms of like 2-3 years out, I'm just saying it's a scenario that like plays out. I don't think he's like, oh man, he's actually great at this right off the bat, let's just give him left field and forget about it indefinitely. But in terms of like if he started out there like next year, I don't think that'd be crazy either, just because like he's only going to kind of get better at it with time. And if he plays average out there while being like a great, one of the best leadoff men in the league, then that could be a home for him. That's been true for many of kind of like a hit first, good base runner, leadoff man who it didn't necessarily translate to defense. Juan Pierre comes to mind, even if that's not a perfect comp for multiple reasons, or Shannon Stewart, stuff like that. So yeah, kind of, but also not like, it's not been such an unambiguous success that like you can't imagine him moving there from ever either.
Well, as long as he gets on base, he still comes up with the big hits late in the games like he did against the Guardians last time these two teams played. I think Sam Antonacci can be a big factor in this 4-game series for the White Sox. It's a big one. Again, to James's point, if they split with Cleveland, they still have first place in hand in the American League Central before arriving to their final homestand before the All-Star break, when they welcome in the Boston Red Sox, who are still a messy team and the Sacramento Athletics, who just recently got some bad news as Brent Rooker is going to miss the rest of the season. So there's a way that if the White Sox can at least get a series split, they could still have, I think, favorable outcomes at home. They could be first place heading to the All-Star break. The first place Chicago White Sox with the first pick overall in the MLB draft. Fun times right now for the Chicago White Sox. We'll see how they start the month of July in Cleveland. But that will do it for this episode of the Sox Machine Podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you just discovered the Sox Machine Podcast, you can subscribe to the audio version of the show wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify and Apple Music. You could watch the video of our show on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Sox Machine as we start pivoting, because everybody's doing this in sports media. You can still get the audio version, don't worry, but we will be doing more with video. You can check out our video work on our YouTube channel and subscribe there at youtube.com/Sox Machine. Follow us on social media. We're on all the social media platforms at Sox Machine. You can follow James at JR Fegan. You can follow me at Sox Machine_Josh. And Jim, I believe you are going to be visiting the Birmingham Barons this weekend.
I will. Taking the drive down 65, checking in on roster. It's gotten a few tweaks here and there. Good opportunity because I know that Winston-Salem comes later in the month or middle of the month, and then Charlotte comes to Nashville at the end of the month. So I should be able to see 3 affiliates over the course of July.
So again, a great reason to follow us on social media, but also a great reason to subscribe to Sox Machine at soxmachine.com/products. Because of your subscriptions, not only does it help keep the lights on at soxmachine.com, but allows us to travel and allows us for that ability to cover the White Sox and the White Sox minor league affiliates. So for Jim to go to Birmingham this weekend, next weekend, James will be in Philadelphia covering all of the MLB All-Star festivities. That only happens with your guys' subscription. So again, monthly plans start at $5, but we still have the sale, right, Jim? Because they're still above 500.
Yeah, as long as they have a winning record, it'll cost some measure of 51 to 54 cents for your first month.
Yes. So take advantage of that. 54 cents your first month, $5 a month afterwards. And you can help support Sox Machine. The more of you subscribe, the more that we can travel. And that will be big, as fingers crossed, we could be talking about bigger series later this year as the White Sox inch closer. I can't believe I'm saying this, to the postseason in 2026. Hopefully I didn't jinx the team. So again, go to soxmachine.com/products and sign up today. The Sox Machine Podcast is a production of soxmachine.com. You're for all things Chicago White Sox baseball. Alongside James Fegan and Jim Margalus, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.